Why do you think, David, as a doctor and indeed a politician, why do you think it is that the rollout of the booster jab, the third jab, is basically failing? Not many people are going for it. Why is that? What would be your theory?
Well, I've spoken to a lot of older people, and I think many of them suffered side effects from the first and second vaccines. I think there's been terrible mixed messaging from government. You know, we've been told constant, or certainly things have changed all the way down the path. So remember, it was only the elderly and the vulnerable, and then the categories changed. So constantly the data we're being told, or the goalposts we're being told, is being changed. And I think there's also now building into this a deep distrust of government. I don't think people believe a word they say anymore. So when they say it's only one more booster, how do we know that? I think there are some other confounding variables. I think many people will have had COVID and have naturally derived immunity. We know that actually having had COVID gives you far superior immunity to having vaccine-induced immunity. And of course, where does this all end? How many vaccines do we end up having? Is this something we have to have every single year? And underlining all of this, which I've said to you before, this has been passed under emergency legislation only. So there is only emergency approval for these vaccines. We're already seeing the Oxford Astra maybe not quite as good as we first thought. The Valneva one looks to be better than that, but the government then actually cancelled their order. So I think people are very confused. I think people have felt they've done their civic duty. And yet, having done that civic duty, having been told that that will end the lockdown, it doesn't feel like they're very free.
No, I suspect also that people who've been invited for the third booster have along the way, they didn't realise when they got their first two jabs that they won't necessarily prevent you from getting COVID or passing it on. So I think there's a sort of a bit of a doubt surrounding the efficacy of the vaccine all round, although we must stress that the government has never pretended it did anything other than save you from dying or getting the very worst effects of it. So to be fair to the government, they've never tried to pretend it does more than that. But I still think that's probably quite an important function. Moving on to the vaccinations of children. We know that in England, only about 11% of 15 to 12-year-olds have taken the jab. The reluctance is clear among children and almost certainly among their parents as well. But I covered this story yesterday, David, and perhaps you can help us think, perhaps you can come up with an explanation. Why on earth are vaccinators being offered a £10 bonus to inject children?
Well, it's a very good question. The government is clearly absolutely adamant that all children are to receive this vaccine. And there are two strands to this debate. One is the medical, which is, as you know, the JCVI says on balance, children don't need this vaccine. And the reason for that, children get COVID, they tend to recover, they have no long-term sequelae. And then there's the societal impact, and that is the things like lockdown, schools being closed, and also acting as a reservoir of transmission to the elderly. But again, the elderly have already been vaccinated. So the reason they're paying these vaccinators that kind of money is because they're desperate for the kids to be vaccinated. And 11%, only 11% of these children have been vaccinated. And again, it goes back to this same problem. We're being drip-fed different information the whole time. I think the public is now thoroughly fed up with being told different things. I think there is deep reticence on the part of parents. It's a huge deal to say, okay, I'm going to vaccinate my child against a disease which won't kill them. And I think parents are very worried about that. They don't know what the long-term side effects are. We know on the yellow card system, there are more reported side effects. So why would you subject your child to that when we just simply don't have long-term data? And that's why I think there is a deep distrust of government. And I think people are very concerned about the mixed messaging coming from government.
Yeah. I should stress that the NHS and the government point out that this £10 extra for vaccinating children is administrative costs or something. However, I just do, you get 10 quid more for injecting a kid than you do injecting an adult, which seems very, very strange to me.
Well, I mean, I think you need to remember, of course, there was always a financial incentive behind it. Remember that GPs were paid
per jab.
£12.58 for a fully vaccinated individual, and the vaccinators themselves were paid about £10, £11 an hour. Yeah. So that the GPs actually, if you do the maths on that, there was an incentive for the GPs to vaccinate.
Yeah. All very strange, though, David. But excellent to talk, as always. Thank you so much for your time. Dr. David Bull there, GP and Deputy Leader of the Reform UK Party. I'm Kevin O'Sullivan, and this is Talk Radio.